Okay, well, welcome back, everyone. We're almost to the finish line here in this series. In the previous presentation, what we did is logged onto the environment as a user, and we launched the Win365 machine that we had provisioned, and it actually looked pretty good, but we really didn't do any type of performance testing. So what I'd like to do is to take one last look at it with an eye about what the user experience would be. How does it behave, right? We'll look at it with a Citrix point of view. What's it like when it's got HDX running on top of it? What it looks like with just regular RDP, and try to compare the two a little bit. Try to explain what the differences in experience would be like. Now, before I go in and start working with the machine itself, let me kind of set the stage about the environment that we have to work in here. A lot of things that will impact the user experience on a virtual machine are things like the virtual machine size, how much RAM and CPU it's got, disk and IOPS and all that. Also, the network quality. What does it have for, the pipe between the user and the machine, and then again, the machine into another resource like the internet. So before we go on, I wanted to kind of set the stage for what this test is going to look like. First off, the virtual machine itself. The virtual machine that we built out is a pretty big one inside of the Win365 environment. It is an 8 processor, 32 gig of RAM, and 512 megabyte disk. Okay, so it's a pretty beefy VM even for Win365. So I don't expect that we're going to have a whole lot of CPU or RAM problems. The graphics adapter that's in there, though, is the one that's a virtual graphics adapter that's part of Windows 365. Citrix does layer an optimized graphics driver on top of that, so that can help. All right, but it doesn't have any GPU optimization. There's no Rocket NVIDIA graphics processor associated with it. It's just a standard virtual GPU. And the networks. In some situations, a thin pipe or a thin network can have a pretty negative experience on users, also if there's a lot of latency. But in this demonstration in this lab, we have almost ideal conditions. The connection between the VM and the internet is on the internet backbone. It's just great. The throughput that you'd see from the VM to the internet is probably about 2 gigabits. I mean, it's big, right? Another big influence is the network connectivity between a user, in this case, my lab, and where the VM is going to be that's in a data center in Virginia. In my case, again, I'm a power user, so I have quite a bit of, internet capacity here that's coming into my house. I'm 400 or 500 megabits down and about 50 megabits up. So that's let's say, an ideal experience for most people. If a user that's in your organization has something less than that, and that can happen, of course, that will impact their user experience, right? So I just wanted to set the groundwork here, basically frame how the test is going to go before we actually launch it. So let's go ahead and launch it and see what we've got to work with here. All right, now I launched Workspace before, so let me go ahead and launch the VM. And we're going to do a little bit of performance testing here. Now I've got to log in, and it's a long password, so forgive me for a moment. Should probably make this a little bit smaller for the demo. Okay, let's see how my typing skills are. Hooray! All right, so we are now inside of the virtual machine, and as I said, it's a pretty beefy one. 8 processors, 32 gig of RAM, and so forth. When we're doing these performance tests, one of the things we like to do is launch some multimedia, some streaming video. That usually gives you a situation where you might have one of the more, let's see, demanding environments to work with. So one of the great places to go out is to YouTube. And I like to use John Saville's site that he does. He's a chief architect at Microsoft, and he covers a lot of material on AVD and on Win365 and just Azure in general. So he does a lot of good stuff here. So I'm just going to pull up one of his videos.
Hey everyone,
and
welcome to this
stop it for a second and mute him, because the audio is really not going to be a great test of performance here. But what I'll do is, before I relaunch this again, I'm just going to use something really, really easy and fast, like Windows Performance. Here it goes, right here. And if I go and just go to the performance piece, we can see things like CPU, memory, disk, and network. And once I run this video again, you'll be able to see how it performs inside of Perfmon. Okay, so there's some streaming video. Let me bring this back up again. There it goes. All right. So you see right now, using the Citrix solution, HDX on top of Windows 365, we've got about 39 to 44% CPU. We got about 6 gig of RAM that's being used. Disk is almost nothing, right? And the amount of bandwidth that we see here is going to vary depending upon what is actually being displayed inside of this video list right in here. Let me bring John back up so he's talking and doing something and moving around here. There we go. And we can see that once there's a bit of content that's on there, the amount of bandwidth that we see is about 8 to 11 megabits of bandwidth. All right, and CPU is still pretty much solid at about 39, 42%. And the memory is somewhere around 5.8 gigabytes. All right. Okay, so this is the Citrix optimized solution. Now, there's a lot more optimizations that we can do. We haven't even optimized the image. There are certain things that you can do to the image to actually improve its performance. Now, before I switch away over to another point of view with this, I'll just point out that you see the video. It looks very, very smooth. It looks really, really good. Okay, and that's some of our optimization technology that's sitting on top of that. Now, what I'm going to do is this. Since I'm an administrator of pretty much everything in here, I also have permissions to use RDP to reach to this. And the only reason I'm doing that is to kind of do some comparisons. So what I'm going to do is launch the Microsoft. Let me go ahead and disconnect from this. There we go. And then what I'll do is I'll run the Microsoft RDP connection. Yeah, that's the Windows app. There you go, Windows app. There we go. Now, when I click on this, it should reconnect to that machine, but using RDP. So let's connect. And see what we get. Here we go. Now, this is not optimized for Citrix, right? Because this is native RDP. So notice it's picking up right where it left off. But now we're using a different protocol. All right. Now, we're just waiting it for it to stabilize for a second. And now let's come back and look at it again. Overall, the experience is actually not bad, but it's not quite as fluid as it was with Citrix. I mean, we're probably running at a slightly lower frame rate. And there might be a reason for that. If you look over here on the network metrics, we've got considerably more bandwidth consumption than we had with native Citrix. There's quite a lot of network optimization technology that goes into HDX that just isn't there with RDP. RDP is not a bad experience, but it's not quite as smooth and not quite as optimized as what you would get with HDX. The CPU consumption, about the same. Memory consumption, about the same. The big differences here is going to be a network, and essentially how smooth the video is. It's not going to be quite as polished as it would be for HDX. Anyway, we've got a lot of other optimizations that we can add that we bring to the table with the Citrix HDX solution. But this is just one of those comparisons that I wanted to throw up there because it's easy to measure. All right. Anyway, there's a little bit of a sample performance test for you. I hope that kind of wraps up the little demonstration about getting a Windows 365 cloud PC up and running and putting the Citrix overlay on top of it. And then you can see how easy it is to get it done, and then just a little tiny peek, at some of the optimizations that we can run on top of it. Anyway, thanks for watching, and stick around. I'm sure I'm not done throwing some content at you.